Hello everyone and welcome to SplitSecond. Have you noticed we now have a game highlights section at the end of the videos, where we try to pinpoint key moments of the matches. Stay until the end to see it. This week we have Baal piloting Chulane iCameo from Joking101 and KumaTheBear. David is on his beloved Muldrotha piloting Spleenface's list. Hélder is on Jakelopeking's Malcolm and Kediss list, and Leite brought Azurel's Bear Weaver, Tymna Kraum. Baal won the spell table roll and kept his first hand, thanks to a deafening silence. He has Flooded Strand and Tropical Island for lands, Joraga Tree Speaker and Hélder for ramp. Force of Will is lacking a blue card, but Silence is ready to prevent David from winning. David kept his first 7 with an Underground Sea and a Misty Rainforest for lands, paired with an early Remora and an Arbor Elf for ramp. Seal of Primordium is a great neutralize on a stick that can sit on the field disencouraging breach plays, and can be recurred with Muldrotha. Ashok can fill his graveyard while blocking his opponent's tutors, and Eternal Witness is always versatile recursion. Hélder mulligan down to 6, keeping a bold no-lander hand, but still with enough mana to get things going. Jeweled Lotus to cast Malcolm turn 1 and start generating more treasures. Lotus Petal just needs 1 land to also be able to cast Kediss, and suddenly he's generating 3 treasures per turn, so it's not so bad. Ponder and Preordain can help him find the needed land, and he still has Red Elemental Blast for interaction, and Brain Freeze to combo with Breach lines. He sent to the bottom a Dig Through Time. Lastly, Leite mulliganed once and found quite a decent hand, with a Snow-covered Swamp and a Mana Confluence for lands. Lotus Petal can allow for a turn 1 Dranith to slow the table, and he also has Baal that can be enough to prevent some Breach lines, or other similar loops. Vampiric Tutor can be key to help him pivot his game plan, and he also has a Silence, which is great at stopping David, right? Ready for this match? Baal starts things off with a Flooded Strand, cracking it for a Tundra, and casts Deafening Silence. However, Hélder didn't remain in silence, protesting how his hand turned into trash. David gets to his turn, plays an Underground Sea and casts a Mystic Remora, which could be fared more if it wasn't for the Deafening Silence. Hélder casts his Jeweled Lotus, Wet with Tears, triggering Remora but unable to pay. He cracks it to cast Malcolm and passes, to much surprise of the table from the lack of land drops. Leite plays a Snow-covered Swamp and casts a Lotus Petal, unable to pay for the Remora. He slams his Dranith Magistrate, which due to turn order didn't come right in time. Baal plays a Tropical Island and casts a Joraga Tree Speaker, also passing the turn. David is happy to pay for the Remora. He plays a Flooded Strand and cracks it for a Tropical Island, to cast an Arbor Elf, finishing his turn. Hélder starts his turn by going into combat and attacks Leite with Malcolm. He creates a treasure and on his second main phase he casts a Lotus Petal, unable to pay for Remora. He passes once again, still without any land drops. Leite plays a Mana Confluence and casts a Fellwar Stone, triggering and unable to pay for the Remora. That fish is doing some work. He still attacks Hélder with Dranith and passes. Baal plays a Rejuvenating Springs and activates Joraga Tree Speaker to level up, so he can then tap for double green and cast Hélder, finishing his turn. David lets the fish go as it filled his hand quite well. He plays a Misty Rainforest, thinks for a bit, but decides to pass. Hélder finally found his first land, a Misty Rainforest as well, that he cracks for a Volcanic Island. He casts a Ponder and disliking what he sees, he shuffles before drawing. He then attacks Leite once again, creating a second treasure and passes. On his end step, Leite fires a Vampiric Tutor, but David actually responds with an Opposition Agent, which resolves. He sees Leite's hand with another Silence and a Silence on a stick, and he ends up tutoring for a Dockside Extortionist. Leite gets to his turn, casts Tymna right away and goes into combat, attacking Hélder with Dranith, triggering Tymna and paying 1 life to draw a card. He plays a Scrubland and passes the turn. Baal draws and plays a Mystic Remora, however, Leite responds with a Mental Misstep, paying 2 life. Baal then goes to combat and attacks Leite with his Hélder and passes. On his end step, David cracks his Misty Rainforest for a tapped Breeding Pool, before going to his turn. He plays a Gaia's Cradle and then casts Leite's Dockside Extortionist through the agent. It resolves, but Hélder feels that he can't crack his artifacts to deny mana to David, as he would be set too much behind, so David gets 5 treasures total. He still casts Seal of Primordium and passes. Hélder plays an island and casts a Preordain, still trying to look for a way out of this mess. He attacks Leite once again, amassing those small commander damage points. He gets a treasure and then passes. Leite goes straight into combat as well and attacks both creatures at Hélder. Tymna triggers and he pays 1 to draw a card. He then casts Baal, Council of Valuation, and Baal responds to it with a Veil of Summer, simply to draw a card, looking for fuel as well. Baal resolves and Leite passes. Baal draws and goes to combat, attacking David this time, as the trade is unfavorable to David. Baal then passes and the table feels like this might be a long game. David plays an Eternal Witness, entering and triggering to return Mystic Remora to his hand, which he casts right away, triggering Baal. He still casts a Llanowar Elves and passes the turn. Hélder draws and he is full of stuff but not quite the right answers. He probes end sizes and ponders with the table on a wheel. After some talking he decides to go for it, to try to come out of his hole. Baal and Remora trigger and he can't pay. Leite passes and Baal decides to fire Petty Theft. The table discusses targets, but he eventually targets Tymna to force Leite to recast her and not simply sit there drawing cards turn after turn. Remora triggers and is unable to pay, and Baal also triggers. Still in response to the windfall, Leite fires a Swords to Plowshares on Malcolm, triggering Remora and unable to pay. As last in turn order, David finally has a say in the matter and casts a Notion Thief. Since everyone played their non-creature spell for the turn, the Thief resolves, and David successfully bypasses 3 silence effects.
Olha um silence ali, e eu deitou fora também, Leite.
Eu também tenho um silence, yeah.
Silence no lixo, se faz favor.
Windfall resolves, and with 7 cards in Hélder's hand, David draws 28 cards total. The table feels the end is near as Hélder passes. Leite draws a land, but one he can tap for mana, Flooded Strand. He attacks Hélder and passes, and on his end step, Baal flashes in Brazen Borrower. Baal draws and goes right into combat, attacking David for 6, before passing. In his end step, David cracks his Seal of Primordial on Baal's Deafening Silence. He lets the fish go and shows the table how he found everything he needed. He casts an Either Spellbomb, triggering Baal and losing 2 life. He cracks it to bounce Baal to Leite's hand, so he can proceed safely to his loops. He then casts Assassin's Trophy on Dranith Magistrate, and Leite decides not to tutor for any land. David then casts Lion's Eye Diamond and then plays a Marsh Flats that he cracks for a Bayou. He then casts Muldrotha the Grave Tide and follows it with a Demonic Tutor to search for Animate Dead. He now cracks his LED for triple blue, discarding his whole hand. He casts the LED from the graveyard and then uses 2 blue to cast the Fimage from the graveyard, using the Muldrotha's effect, and it enters as a copy of Muldrotha. Due to the legend rule, he must put one of the 2 into his graveyard as a state-based action, and he puts the original one, so with the new one, the Phantasmal Muldrotha, he is now capable of casting another artifact from his graveyard. He does so, casting LED and cracking it for triple black. With those, he casts Animate Dead on Muldrotha in the graveyard that enters the battlefield, and once again, due to the legend rule, he must choose one and put the other into his graveyard. He now chooses to keep the original one, which is a new object, and allows him to recast LED for triple blue to cast Fimage once again. Through this loop, he generates infinite blue, black and then green. With infinite Sultai mana, he can cast and recast either Spellbomb from the graveyard, amidst the 2 different Muldrothas, to draw his entire deck and cast Thassa's Oracle. GG. Thank you for joining us for today's match, everyone. Hullbreacher was banned, but this sneaky thief still sees play and steals games the old-fashioned way. Turn Order also played a major role in David's win, as both Leite and Baal had interaction for it, but they had to speak first in Apnap order, so David managed to cast the thief after their 2 non-creature spells for the turn, and win over 2 silence. Let justice be made. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, TJ Rap, Mike Purr, Ajimu, Drunken Housecat, V, RJ, Heated Chill, Pina, Ricardo, Dragonstake and Katarina, our stack breakers. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing or by becoming a patron yourself. If you want to go through other Commander adventures, click one of the videos on the right. If you want to talk with us about our games or other EDH related matters, join us on Discord. Join us again next week for a new set of Commanders and more decisive plays. See you all then.